Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Revit Pure Live. I am your host, Nicolas Catelier, an architect, a BIM specialist, live here in Quebec City. It is currently 8 p.m. here in Quebec City, and we are February 15. I'm curious, if you're watching live, can you please tell us in the chat where you are watching from? And before moving on to the guest, I have a couple of things to announce. The first one, next week, there's no episode of Revit Pure Live. We're taking a break for a week. However, there's going to be a webinar, a Revit Pure webinar. This is different from a YouTube live stream. If you want to watch, you have to register to this one. And this webinar is called Mastering Visibility in Graphics in Revit Families. It is at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on February 22nd. And if you want to register, go over to revitpure.com/family webinar. It's a 1-hour live session. We talk about mastering the graphics and controlling the visibility, understanding how to make things visible and how to make them invisible. There are multiple ways you can do so. So during this session, we're going to explore multiple ways. And yeah, if you join the webinar, you also receive a handout, a QLED handout. If you're familiar with Revit Pure, maybe you've used some of our pamphlets before. This is like a pamphlet that I've created specifically for all people attending the webinar about visibility in Revit families. So that is 3 p.m. on February 22nd. Make sure to join. Having a glance at the chat, we've got Tom from London, UK, Triam from the Philippines, James from Auckland, New Zealand, Ning from Vancouver. So, and Cornelius. Hello to everyone. Thanks for watching live another episode. This is actually episode 50. Isn't it cool? Never thought I would get there. So thanks for all of you for joining week after week. And okay, so next week there's this webinar. But the week after, I will be joined by Naveen Nabil, who works at Ideate Software. And the title of the show is Mastering the Art of Revit Data. Should be an interesting one. This is on March 1st at 8 p.m. So another evening session. We've got Christina also from Ontario. Thanks for being live with us today. And Ahmad from Iran. All right, so today's guest is Monica Greco. Monica is currently based in Auckland, New Zealand. She graduated from the Open Polytechnic of New Zealand in 2016 in architectural technology. She has worked for Jasmax for the last 6 years, starting as a BIM specialist, then a BIM lead, and a BIM lead associate. In 2022, she became a project BIM manager associate. Before she worked at other architecture firms such as ACOM. She's an active member of the Revit user group in Auckland and a founding member of the Dynamo user group of New Zealand. So welcome to the show, Monica.
Hi, thank you. Great introduction. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for accepting the invitations. So just there's a time difference. For you, it's the afternoon. It's like 2 or 3 p.m. That's right?
Yeah, it's a sunny day finally in Auckland.
All right, it's the evening. It's 8 p.m. here in Quebec City. All right, I'll start with a question I like to ask my guests. How did you get interested in BIM?
It was kind of like a natural journey for me starting using Revit when I started working at ACOM. Actually started as a CAD cadet was my first title at ACOM. And yeah, I just loved using the software. And after a while I was using the software, it just the opportunity came to work more in a support role. And yeah, that's pretty much been my journey. And I've done support for Revit, or in general BIM, for a few years now. And now I just moved into more of a project BIM manager role where I'm doing more of the coordination side of things.
All right. So can you tell us about Jasmax? It's one of the, I didn't know about it before, but it's one of the big firms that are there in New Zealand.
Yeah, we are one of the biggest architectural firms in New Zealand. We do yeah, we got urban designers as well, landscape designers. And yeah, we are New Zealand, but we also recently expanded in Australia as well. We got an office in Sydney.
Okay. Okay, it's in Australia as well. All right. So I think we should talk about today's topic. So at first, I think I remember wrongly. I thought we were going to talk about Revit plugins, generally speaking, but it turns out the topic is actually maybe even more interesting. It's about Revit performance when using plugins. And the funny thing, I think it's a pretty good topic. Even just today, I had my Revit kept crashing over and over again. And there's this warning that pops up where you can send a message to Autodesk, and normally I don't fill it up, but I've said what's going on.
Everyone
And
always ignores it.
yeah, yeah, and I got an email hours later that was saying we've analyzed your error message, and you should check out your plugins. One of them is probably causing the crashes. And so like, one of my plugins, I have like 15 plugins installed because everyone wants me to try all their plugins. So I have a bunch, and I'll sometimes forget to uninstall them. But it turns out that having lots of plugins can cause performance issues, load time, and even crashes, instability, and multiple problems. Is that right?
Yeah. I think plugin come with a lot of good things, a lot of advantages. I'm pretty sure we all have a lot of plugins that we can't do without. But at the same time, they can cause a lot of headaches. And I think as being quite a relatively large firms, because we got almost 300 people now, but over 150 just Revit users, and we have 18 plugins.
18,
So
yeah,
I think we've experienced the good and the ugly of having too many plugins. They become quite hard to manage.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think you have a few slides for us, so I do have multiple questions, but I think I'll let me. Okay. Okay, so we can see your screen now. I'll let you kind of give an overview of the topic, and then we can continue the discussion. But I'll let you keep going for now. Introduce the topic.
Yeah. So today I just wanted to really talk about the pros and cons about having a lot of plugins, but also what we're trying to do at Jasmax to try and minimize all of the issues that come up with having too many plugins. And yeah, like I said, we got 18 plugins, and 12 of those 18 are deployed to all of the users. And then we got 6 that are just deployed to a limited number of users because they're just specific for certain tasks or certain projects. So I'll take you through the advantages first, and then we'll start looking at all of the disadvantages and the issues that come up with having too many plugins installed. So the first big advantage is the fact that plugins really allow us to do things in a more automated way and also in a faster way. And I think this can be reflected in the amount of plugins that are available from the Autodesk App Store. Like if you actually go and have a look, there's over 1,200 plugins that are available for download that allow us to do things, just faster. So it can save us a lot of time. And then plugins obviously also allow us to do things that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise with the out-of-the-box software. I think most of us have got a love-hate relationship with plugins where we get all excited about all of the new features, but then we also get very frustrated. We can't just do something that seems easy to do. And that's where the plugins always come into play. And I find quite interesting that if you actually go and have a look at the Revit ideas on the Autodesk forum, for those that don't know, you can actually post on the Autodesk forum, you can post ideas on how Autodesk could improve the software. And if you go and filter just by the ones giving support, and there's over 10,000, so it's quite a lot.
Yeah, and do you think Revit for Mac is going to happen? Not so sure. It was the first one.
I know. And then, yeah, if you just go and have a look at the top voted, you will find that a lot of them actually got a plugin already that can do the job. Like there's definitely more than one plugin that can create hatch and fill patterns. And then if you just scroll down, there's definitely more than one plugin that does the auto spell check. So I think it's actually a good place for people that want to deploy a plugin to come and have a look at, where they can cover the gaps the Autodesk has left us with. Oh, sorry. And then integration with other software. So we all work with other software that need to talk to Revit. And the only way that that can happen is via Revit add-ins. These are some of the softwares that we use. That we got an add-in that talks to Revit. We got Uniforma, which is our project information management software. We got the Rufus Revisto for collaboration, Unify, which is our library of content. So they all have a plugin that talks to Revit. And then rendering. So this is particularly relevant for, I think, architects, but 3D rendering software has been growing exponentially in the last few years. And 3D rendering services have become almost essential in the architecture industry. So for many architects using Revit with a plugin that allows to do rendering has become a necessity. So lots of us have got Enscape or Luminion or Twinmotion, and they all need to talk to Revit. And then better model management. So I think we're all experiencing working with bigger models and more complex models. And with that also comes the need to have better model management to keep the models as sturdy as possible. And there are a lot of plugins that allow us to do that. And here I put my favorite one, which is Radiat Explorer. But in general, I always use all of the Autodesk software plugins. I got Explorer and BIM Link and Style Manager open pretty much all the time.
Yeah, it's funny that next week we have got Naveen from Ideate. So if you're curious,
Yeah.
you don't know much about these plugins, it's going to be a good one.
Yeah,
so
definitely my favorite.
So it is your favorite.
Yeah, I guess
okay.
I do a lot of model management. So yeah, their tools, and I also think they got a great team behind the software. I find it's always easy to get new things implemented, and they really take the feedback and try and work on that. So
do you talk to the team often, like to send them your
I don't, not anymore, just because I don't work in a support role anymore, and I don't do all of the testing. But one of my colleagues is part of the testing team, so when they roll out new features, it's as Jasmax, we are some of the people that do the testing with the new features and provide feedback. Yeah. But yeah, so these are all of the add-ins that we got at Jasmax, just to give you an idea. So we got these ones are all for task automation or model management. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with some of them, like Revit and other software I just mentioned. The Jasmax toolbox is one that we developed in-house. So it's got some tools that we created within Jasmax. And then Orkestra, for those that don't know, it's a plugin that allows us to deploy Dynamo scripts to all Revit users. So they can run a Dynamo script like by clicking a button like it was any other add-in instead of having to open Dynamo. And then it transmits, I think comes with the out-of-the-box Revit software. Shadow color is just to create shadow studies, and then the console to section box has got some cool feature that make it a bit better than the out-of-the-box section box tool that's in Revit. And then, yeah, these are all plugins that allow us to communicate with other software. So yeah, Unify is for our content library. Revisto is for 3D clash detection. The Rufus allows us to manage building data for some of the projects. MasterKey connects to our specifications. Bluebeam, you all know Bluebeam, I think. Sapphire, it's used to analyze building performance. Uniforma is our project information management software, and then Enscape for 3D rendering. And the last one is BIMBeats. So BIMBeats is a plugin that allows us to capture real-time data on user activity from Revit. and I actually want to show that one later. So yeah, let's talk about the disadvantages. There's a few. The most obvious one, I think, is the longer opening times. And I'm talking about just opening Revit. I'm not talking about even opening a model. Like this is just launching Revit before you even open a model. So I've done some testing in 2021, 2022, and actually I've been trying to open Revit without any add-in and then do one add-in at a time and then try to open it with all of the add-ins time, and I was just timing it. And when you open Revit without any add-ins, it takes between 30 to 40 seconds. And when you open it with all of the add-ins, we're talking about 3.5 minutes for Revit 2022 and over 2.5 minutes for Revit 2021. So there's like a 3 minutes difference, which might not seem like a lot, but
so that is like for it's the additional time, is that right? Is that the
just additional time
okay.
just to launch Revit.
So yeah, PyRevit is
so
it's quite heartbreaking because it's one of my favorites.
I know, Enscape and PyRevit seems to be the biggest offenders. Yeah,
Enscape, interesting. I have it. I don't use it all the time, so maybe I should disable it when I don't use it.
Yeah, that's what I do, because I have it but I never use it, so I just disable it. Which I find quite crazy. But the way actually it works, as for those that don't know, so when Revit loads, it will read through it goes through two locations on your computer. One is the app data folder under Autodesk, and then Revit and add-ins, and then you need to look at your version that you're using. But like 2022 I'm using. So and then the other location is the program data folder. And again on the Autodesk, Revit and add-ins and the Revit version. So all of these files that you see here that got .add-in, they're called add-in manifest files. And when Revit launches, it goes through these two folders and it will load all of these files one at a time. So I think the way it works is that, the more files you have, the longer it's going to take for Revit to go through all of these files and load them up. But yeah, I mean, I think 3 minutes difference is quite significant, and it affects me particularly. I think someone in a support role that's constantly opening and closing Revit, it might not affect too much people that open one model in the morning and then they stay with that model the whole day. I'm constantly opening and closing, and that waiting time is a bit of a killer sometimes.
Yeah, I do have a question. What's the difference between, so one of them is installed locally, I guess, for an individual user, and the other is for all users in the computer?
Yeah, good question. Actually, I'm not 100% sure, because at Jasmax, like everybody's got all of these add-in, I guess, deployed to their machine, other than certain specific plugins. So I'm not 100% sure about the logic of having some in here and some in here. Yeah. I think it's explained, from someone who's in IT. It's all explained on the Autodesk website. Yeah. And then another disadvantage is the longer testing. Now, this is particularly relevant if you work for, I think, a medium to large size company. At Jasmax, we have a very rigorous protocol where we need to test everything. So every new version of an add-in, every new version of the Revit software, we need to test it. And we actually try and do quarterly rollouts of all of these new features, so that we do the testing only, once every quarter. And just to show you, this is our spreadsheet for the testing, where we test all of the different Revit versions that we got. Usually it's only 4 versions. We try and keep only 4 versions at a time. We're trying to go down to 2 versions, but it seems impossible. We can't get there. But for every version, we test all of the tools of all of the add-ins. And we actually do this we got 3 different machines at Jasmax. So we repeat all of this for 3 different machines. So it can take quite a long time, as you can imagine. But we just found that it's essential. We have to do it. We've been burnt too many times in the past where we rolled out a new, version of an add-in, and it's caused issues, it's caused crashes, and then to try and troubleshoot all of that and figure out why we're experiencing the issue. It takes time, but also when you do it under pressure, that people got deadlines, and you need to figure out why the Revit is crashing.
What kind of issues? I'm curious. What kind of issues did you have with plugins? Did you remember?
Yeah, well, we've had lots of times where Revit just crashes when you do something,
Crashing,
and Revit just crashing lots of times. Other times we've had add-ins that have been interacting with Revit, so you couldn't perform certain tasks properly because the plugin was preventing you from doing that. And also we've had plugins that were interacting with each other and preventing, one plugin was preventing the other one from working properly. So we've had issues where Enscape wasn't working because, for example, I think it was PyRevit that was preventing Enscape from loading properly. So all sorts.
Interesting. Is it still the case? Do you know? So you cannot use both at the same
Well,
time?
no, we've been doing this testing, this error testing for quite a while. I mean, I've been at Jasmax for 6 years, but definitely for the last 4 years, we've been very consistent with doing all of this testing. And still, even though we do the testing, every now and then something slips through, and you do end up having some issues.
So it's pretty interesting. So so you test if like what the tool says it will do, it actually does it, and then make sure that there's no crash or no kind of unintended consequences.
Yeah, make sure that it's mainly making sure that the Revit opens fine, there's no crashes, and the tool seems to be doing the job. It's a bit hard because obviously you're not doing it into a live project with lots of people working the same model. That's why, you're always going to, you can't cover every scenario, but it's a good coverage. So we seem to have managed to avoid very big issues. Yeah, and also lots of times we've had issues where there's like a new version of an add-in coming up, and different people have got different version of the same add-in, and those different versions don't like each other. So Revit's been crashing. So we always need to make sure that everybody's on the same version. Yeah. It's quite interesting because it's things that you don't think about, but when you got so many Revit users, you tend to experience a lot of these problems. Then this is very closely related to the previous one, but sorry, going back to the other slide. Longer troubleshooting. So the problem is that even though we do all of the testing, like I said, sometimes you still end up having some issues. And one thing is having issues that happen with no plugin, and another thing is having issues that happen with a lot of plugins. Because 99% of the times the issue is caused by a plugin. And the only way that you can troubleshoot to try and figure out what plugin is causing the issue is actually to disable all of the add-ins and then enable them one at a time and see if the issue is still happening. And that can take, again, quite a while. And it's not nice when you're under pressure because the team has got deadlines. And like I said, sometimes you have 2 plugins that are interacting with each other, and that's what causing the issues. So you might go through all of the plugins and it all seems fine, but it's only when you start enabling 2 at a time that you figure out what the issue is. And then another thing to be mindful of is when you have plugins installed, and you mentioned this earlier, is that you don't get support from Autodesk. So if you have an issue, like you got your Revit is crashing, and you try and log a ticket with Autodesk, the first thing that Autodesk will ask is, have you got any plugin installed? And if you say yes, then they go, well, you need to disable all of the add-ins. If it's still happening, then we'll help you. Otherwise, it's not our problem.
Yeah, I love that movie, Office Space, by the way. It's so funny. Yeah, that's right. Especially when there's like 18 plugins, like you mentioned. Like if there's one of them, might be easy to see what the issue is, but 18
Yeah.
of them,
Yeah.
quite crazy troubleshooting.
And unfortunately, it seems like the list is just constantly growing. Like we get constant requests for new plugins. It's like when it's like 18 seems a lot, but like it's hard to put a stop to them because we actually need them.
Yeah.
But yeah, it becomes harder and harder to manage. And then another thing is confusions amongst the Revit users, and for those that do training, it's a constant struggle. But we spend a lot of money and a lot of resources buying the add-in, doing Revit session to teach people how to use the add-ins. But then people have got so much to work with, and it's already hard enough for them to learn all of the tools that are available in the out-of-the-box Revit, and then they also need to learn all of the tools within the plugins, and it's just too much for them. So people tend to forget, mostly tend to forget or just start getting a bit confused. But I mean, if you go and have a look at my Revit, and I've loaded all of the plugins right now, I mean, they don't even fit at the top over here. So I actually need to go and click on the arrows on the right to access all of the tabs. And some plugins,
I have that problem too sometimes.
Yeah, like it works on the bigger screen, but the small screen doesn't really. And then you got so many tools, like we got so many tools here. If you go and have a look at Revit, it's even worse. Like you can imagine people that, like for us, I guess it's easier because for us, for people more in a support role, or where we actually deploy the tool, we learn about the tool before we deploy them. But for people that are just using it because they need to issue the drawing as fast as possible.
Yeah, I just recently reinstalled Revit on a new laptop, and it kind of felt fresh. I'll admit it, I enjoyed it, having no plugins installed at all at first. And then, of course, you need some of them, but it's kind of nice to have that simplified interface.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure a lot of people can relate if they work in a support role where they constantly get questions, ask, how do I do this? Or they complain because Revit can't do this. And it's like, your reply is always, we got this plugin that can do it. And we've had the plugin for the last 3 years. How do you not know about this? We got so many training sessions on it. But yeah, it's just constant struggle. So what are we doing about it? But I have to do that every time. To go back to my. Yeah, so we are looking at ways that we can try and overcome all of these, issues that come with add-ins. And the first one, I kind of mentioned it already, but it's just very strict rules. And we are deploying new add-ins. So all of the add-ins need to be tested, and I showed you our testing spreadsheet. Users can't install add-ins by themselves. That's like an absolute no-no. People are not allowed to. Everything needs to go via our IT team and our BIM team. It needs to be approved, and then it needs to be tested, and then it can be deployed. And then we try and do quarterly updates to roll all of the new versions of the add-ins and the software, so that we do the testing only 4 times a year, and not every time somebody has got a new request. There's a bit of a difference because some of the add-ins are not really required by everybody. They're very specific to like a project or a specific task. So you might have only 1 person or 3 people that need the add-in. In that case, we are a bit less strict, as in we just deploy the plugin to that 1 person and we just monitor them very closely. But if it's something that goes out to everybody, it needs to go through the thorough testing. And this is a very simplified flowchart of how it works. But when there is a new version of an add-in or a new add-in that comes up, the first question that we ask ourselves is, does the whole practice need it or not? If not, like I said, it can be deployed to only that person or that small group, and we just monitor it very closely. And if there's no issue, then any new release will be incorporated in the quarter rollout. If the whole practice needed, then we ask ourselves, is it critical or not? And by critical, I mean, for example, if we do all of the testing and then we roll out the new version of the add-in, thinking it's going to be all smooth and fine, but then an issue comes up, and maybe we actually go back to the people that created the add-in and go, you need to fix it, and they fix it, and they come back to us with a new version to fix the problem that the previous version had. That becomes a critical release for us. We need to, push it out to everybody so we don't have the issue anymore. So in that case, we just roll it out, cross our fingers, and then we just monitor it. If it's not critical, it waits for the quarterly rollout. But then we also ask ourselves, is it considered a high risk? And here I put an example of MasterKey. For those that don't know, MasterKey is a plugin that connects to MasterSpec, and that's what we use for the specification here in New Zealand. And it's considered a high risk for us because it's caused us a lot of headaches in the past. Most of our issues with plugin were due to MasterKey, with very crashing and all sorts. So with that one, we do really extensive testing before we roll out a new version. We actually pulled it at some point because it just wasn't working. We were tired of having to deal with all the issues. And we just recently reintroduced it, but it's exclusive to a very limited number of people. And we are monitoring to make sure there's no other problem before we roll it out to everybody else.
And so that MasterKey plugin, it's for specs. And what issues did it create exactly? Was it just that it was making Revit crash, or it's
we've had lots of crashes, lots of issues with keynotes, because the way it works is when you go and add the keynotes, you actually add them from the plugin, and it picks up the right keynote from the section in the specification. And we've had issues where people just before a deadline, we got all of the keynotes disappearing.
Oh,
so yeah.
But you still use it, so we're not totally.
Well, yeah, we just introduced it not so long ago, just because it's a great plugin if it worked very well. It saves a lot of time, so instead of going export the Excel spreadsheet from the specification and then convert it into the keynote file and load it into Revit. Like it can be very good. So we just introduced it, yeah.
MasterKey,
but not
I'll
to
check
everybody.
It out.
Yeah. I also think just a generalization, but there's only I think one person behind the development of MasterKey, so it's relatively small, and I often find that you get less issues with plugins where you have a big team behind it, or the bigger names.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Than the smaller ones where you have one person behind it, and maybe they don't. Like I mentioned with other software, they got so many companies testing their plugins and the new features before they release it to the public. Not everybody does that. So we've never had issues with other software. But yeah, lots of issues with Revit, MasterKey, Enscape.
Yeah, well, Ideate, it's a big team. By Revit is just Hassan, I think, and maybe help from others, but it's not even kind of a full-time thing for him. So
yeah. And then understand add-in usage. So so the thing is, we've realized that having too many add-ins can cause issues. But so the question that we're asking ourselves is, do we actually need all of these add-ins? And also, are user using what we've given them? Because like I said, we're spending money. We've even built our own add-in, but are people taking advantage of that or not? But before we can, make any action, we need to get the data behind it. We need to understand what people are using, if they're using it, so that we can make informed decision. And we're using two tools for that. One is BIMBeats and the other one is Orkestra. And so BIMBeats, like I said, it records what users are doing in Revit. So every action that we do in Revit is recorded. And then you can access the data. The data is on the cloud, and you can access online. And then with the data, you can create some nice dashboards. And this is a dashboard I created for the add-in usage. So we're having a look at the other software usage, Revit, the auto section box, eTransmit, the CPS tools and the Jasmax toolbox. The automated component is actually one of the tools that's part of the Jasmax toolbox, but it's picked up separately. And straight away you can see, actually, sorry, so I'm looking at the last 30 days. I can probably expand this to the last 90 days. Like nobody is using the automated component tool, and that's something that we spent money developing to help people, and nobody's taking advantage of that. So you can see what tools people are using more than others. So straight away you kind of get an understanding of where maybe there's a lack of knowledge or the tool is just not needed, and you can start asking those questions. And all of this can inform, our training sessions for the year, and potentially deciding whether we pull an add-in or not. Though in saying that, it seems like every add-in has got a purpose, if not all of the tools, some of the tools. At some point, I thought nobody was using the CPS tools, but it turned out that there's actually a few tools that are quite useful in the end. People are taking advantage of that. And with a bit more of raising the awareness, people are using them more and more. So this is one of the way we get data. And the other one is Orkestra. So I mentioned earlier that Orkestra allows you to deploy Dynamo scripts to everyone. So I'll just show you. Actually, it looks like this. And when you log in, it's open. Just takes a few seconds, but then you will see a lot of tools that appear. Yeah, there you go. So you got all of these icons at the top, and it becomes like a normal add-in where you just you want to do an action, you just click on the icon, but it's actually running a Dynamo script in the background. So we find this very useful for people to use the Dynamo scripts that we've created, because it's less daunting than having to open Dynamo. The only thing about Orkestra is that BIMBeats doesn't pick up the usage. It picks up that someone using Orkestra, but it doesn't pick up which script they're actually running. So to have a look at the usage of all of these, all of these tools, we actually need to have a look in Orkestra. Where's the analytics in Orkestra? And we can start seeing, are the Dynamo scripts that we are creating, are they actually being used by people? And if they are, who's using the tools? Can we start identifying some of the champions that are good at using the tools? And maybe we can use this champion to increase awareness across the practice. I think the most useful one is the usage by definition. And then you can have a bar chart. And then these are all of the scripts that we got available. And then you can see how many times they've been used. And you can narrow it down by a certain period. And the usage per user, you start seeing which are the champion people that are using most of the script. Going back to my presentation.
Yeah, I do have a couple of questions about Orkestra. So what I've seen from it, it says that it also helped to manage the multiple packages and from different versions of Dynamo. How does that work? And
it's probably the main reason why we started using Orkestra, because what we were finding is that we were creating the scripts, and then we were telling people, just open Dynamo, run the script, it will be fine. But then every time people needed to load all of the packages, and they were forgetting to load the packages, or every time you start a new Revit version or a new Dynamo version, you had to update the path to the packages, and people just didn't know. And every time it's like, oh, it doesn't work. See, it doesn't work. It's like, it is working. You just need the packages loaded.
And with the Dynamo player, it's not like it doesn't load the packages, at least not at the moment.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. So that's why with Orkestra, you just load the packages on I guess the app, and then they get pushed to the cloud, and then they get automatically deployed to everyone. So When people run the script, Orkestra makes sure that they got the right packages for the right versions already installed. And yeah, that solved a lot of headaches. Yeah. Actually, I don't know, I'm happy to show you, but so you can have different workspaces, and then you can sort the scripts however you want. I've sorted them by the Revit version. And then you can create different folders, like I got folders for model audits, model management, general task automation, and then some for urban design. And also got a work in progress folder for Revit 2022. And then you can just go into the workspace settings. And over here, this is where you go, these are the packages that I want for this workspace. So they get loaded automatically every time someone runs a script within this workspace. Yeah. We found it very, very useful. I have, but it's great to see that people don't come complaining every time that the scripts don't work. They do work.
Yeah, me too. Like, even if you think it's simple, just open Dynamo, go install that package, but it's already quite enough. Like, what is Dynamo? What is a package? You know.
Yeah.
So the more simple you can make it, the better.
Yep. Yeah, another thing is so the ability to enable and disable add-ins. So the thing is, you don't need all of the add-ins at the same time every time. You only need 1 or 2 add-ins maybe at one time, and that's it. So why open Revit every time with all of the add-ins loaded, wait for 3 minutes for Revit to load, have all of the tabs at the top when you actually don't need them? So what if we could, just have the ability to enable and disable them as we need them? That would be great. And it's probably quite simple, because in theory, all you need to do is actually remove the add-in manifest files from these locations. Like, if you remove the add-in manifest file, then Revit does not read it, so it does not load it. However, we don't want people to touch these add-in manifest files, because that comes with other issues down the line. Mainly because our IT, when we deploy the add-ins, we just push these files to people's local machine. And if people remove an add-in manifest file, and then we want to replace this in the folders, but there's already another one that's loaded in, and they might override it with a previous version, and then you have people with different versions installed in Revit. So we just don't want people to touch these files. But we did try using it's called Boost Your BIM, and it's actually free to download from the internet. It's just an exe file that you run. And the concept is quite simple. So all of it that it does, so if you can filter by the Revit version that you want to look at the top, and then it will show you all of the add-ins that you got. And this is the add-in path, so you can see all of the add-in manifest files. There are even the program data folder or the app data folder. And then you can just select it, and you can just go enable and disable it. Like, for example, with Enscape, I click disable, and now under enable, it tells me no. And if you go and have a look at the path, it just added a dot disabled after dot add-in. So all it does is just renaming the add-in manifest file so that Revit can read it. So the concept is extremely simple behind it, and seems to work quite well. But again, the problem that we found at Jasmax is that, and for myself, because I've been pretty much the only one using it, we haven't made it public to the whole of Jasmax because we're just testing it. But the problem I was finding is that I was disabling a lot of plugins, but then RT was pushing out new versions. So I was ending up in the folder with 2 versions of the same file, one that was called .addin and the other one that was called .addin.disabled. And then when I was going in here and trying to disable the add-in again, it wouldn't allow me to. because there was already a file with that extension and with that
Okay.
name
So when
called.
the plugin is updated, it creates another
Yeah,
.add-in
it's another
file.
layer of issues. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Mm.
Yeah. So I was disabling it, and I was ending up with an .add-in.disable file in there, and then RT was pushing out a new version. So I was ending up again with the same file, but with just .add-in extension.
There's yes, sorry about that. There's a question from Jordan. He says, do you need to restart the Revit application for the add-in manager to take effect?
Yeah, I was getting good
Okay.
question. So
Okay.
it depends. There are some add-ins that are allowed to load while you got Revit open, and other add-in that will require Revit to restart for the add-in to load. So that's another issue of using this one, that you need to be very careful, because some add-in will require Revit to restart. So the concept is great, but not quite there yet. So we actually working on a Jasmax to start trying to come up with our own plugin to enable and disable the add-ins. First of all, that will not allow you to disable add-ins that require Revit to restart, but also there are some add-ins that you definitely don't want to disable because they are like from Autodesk by default, like you don't want to disable the work sharing monitor application, or you definitely don't want to disable the collaborate add-in. So giving access to the general population of Revit user to this one is a bit dangerous. We don't want the average Revit user start modifying these files. So hopefully we can create a plugin ourselves that will allow people to disable only the add-in that we want them to disable. Still trying to figure out what's the best way to do it, whether it's going to be by renaming the add-in manifest file or just removing it temporarily from that location and then pasting it back. I don't know yet. Still trying to work that out with IT.
Yeah, I was checking out the Stentec add-in manager today, like to solve the issue that I mentioned at the beginning of the show. And it turns out that D-Roots as a tool, let me share the screen on my side briefly. Yeah, D-Roots, it's called the D-Roots App Manager. So I've tried it very quickly. It looks similar to the Stentec, but maybe it has a few more features. I would be curious to try it. So it's D-Roots App Manager. So you can try it out.
I'll have a look at that one as well. Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, it's a bit tricky, but I mean, I think it would be great if you could just. I mean, I think it should just something that should come with the out of the box, Revit software, the ability to just enable and disable the add-ins that you wish, because nobody needs them all enabled at one time. And then this one. So, we're also looking at. Not looking, but it's something to keep in mind. So when you're having issues, you can also check the order in which the add-ins are loaded, because Revit will go through these two folders and it actually loads the add-ins in alphabetical order. And that's also the order in which you see the tabs. So like the tabs will be from left to right in alphabetical order depending on the name of the add-in manifest file. And what we had in the past is, I think it was Enscape and PyRevit again, but I think one of them was loading before the other and it was causing Revit to crash. So we just reversed the order in which they were loaded and it solved the issue. So you could potentially, when you're doing your testing or troubleshooting, you could rename the add-in manifest file to make sure that they are, at the top in alphabetical order. And if you notice, Enscape and Revisto. So Revisto's got an underscore at the beginning and Enscape has got 0 underscore. And it's not something that we've done, or it's something that the developer had done. And I just think it's because they want their tab to appear at the beginning. And so their tabs don't get lost. Trick. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so just something else to be aware of. And then a tool database. So I've said how having lots of plugins can be overwhelming and confusing for Revit users. And we try and do, a lot of training sessions, repeat the same things over and over again. We got an internet with a lot of information and user guides, but still it seems to be hard for people to just absorb all of that knowledge information. So we're trying to come up with sort of like a central database or a repository of information where people can look at what they want to achieve in Revit and see if there's a tool that can do that. So we are working, this is still very much a work in progress, don't judge me for the design of it. But it's just a Power BI dashboard where at the top you can just filter by what you want to do. So for example, if you want to create some sheets, you can click on the button and then it will filter at the bottom all of the tools that can do it. So at the moment we got the other apps and the Jasmax toolbox that can do it. And then there's a link to the user guide on our intranet that will tell you how to use it. This is just an Excel spreadsheet, nothing too fancy that's linked to Power BI, but again, it's just something central that people can refer to. And the idea is then to embed this one into our intranet, so people have just got that one that they know it's there and they can search for something. The downside is that it's something that we need to maintain a bit manually because it comes from an Excel spreadsheet. But at the same time, we can't expect people to keep up to date with all of the new tools if we are not the first one in the first place, you know, to keep up with the new tools and update the spreadsheet. So
it's interesting that you're using Power BI for a dashboard.
Why do you think it's interesting? Why have you got any other ideas?
No, well, I've seen a lot of people last week when Mercedes, she was using, when using Notion for note keeping and the internal documentation. Right. So in your case, you're using Power BI.
Yeah, I think it just started because I love Power BI. I just like playing with it, and I've been playing with it a lot with Dynamo and creating dashboard for the model audits. So it's just a tool that I'm familiar with, and it's the first thing that came to mind.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. I played with it last year quite a lot. It's quite powerful for sure.
Yeah, and yeah, it's great that you can actually embed it into a page on our internet, so people don't really need to open Power BI. They can just open our internet and see. Yeah, and this is the last one. Every time it's going all the way to the bottom. No, sorry. Yeah, the last one, I just mentioned it already, but we're really trying to keep up with the training session and the user guides. Sometimes it really feels like we are going nowhere with it, but we have to keep trying. We just throw everything that we got at Revit users, hoping that they absorb something. And even if they don't, I think at least they hear the names. They kind of remember some of the things, and at least they remember that they can come and ask us about it if they ever get stuck. So it is something that we're constantly working on, training sessions and user guide, just to increase awareness, increase the knowledge of our Revit users. It's a bit hard also because I don't think it becomes relevant to people until they actually experience, an issue, or they get stuck with something that they can't do in Revit and they need something else. They are constantly work in progress. So yeah, as a final thoughts, I guess the things that we realize we really need to do to try and overcome all of the issues that we get with the plugin is definitely keep up with the extensive testing. It does take a long time to test everything, but we've noticed that it's really worthwhile doing it down the line because you don't want issues coming up when people are under pressure and we're working live in projects. Trying to figure out a strategy to enable and disable the add-ins because that would be very useful, I think, for everyone. Just have the add-ins enabled that you need at one time. Get the data if you can, because you can't really make informed decision if you don't have the data to understand what people are using, what tools are they using, where are they lacking the knowledge, or if you got a tool that you paid money for but nobody's using it, should you use that money for something else? Should you ditch it, or should you, train your people to use it? And then keep sharing the information. Like I said, training. Yeah.
Do
That
you
was
have
me.
live sessions with your team sometimes, like to train them? So what is the best way to communicate with the team? Is it like emails? Is
Yeah,
it
we
Slack
we
or Teams?
it's a mix of everything. We tried a bit of everything, but we do a mix of live training session, and they are in person, but also available. I guess particularly with COVID, we made them available online for anyone who's working from home. That's every fortnight at the moment, I believe. We got a lot of user guides on the Vine, which is our internet, and then we try and do posts periodically just to remind people where the user guides are. We also use we use Teams. We got a chat group just for Revit users where we post some tips. Sometimes trying to link to the internet and get used to people, because we got so much information available on internet, but people still struggle to the idea of having to go and search for solutions on the internet. It's just easier to come and ask the BIM support team. So we really try and put the links to the internet everywhere so that people get used to going to the internet for answer. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. There's a few interesting question. We have one from who asked about it. Ahmad asked if you can share your PowerPoint file.
Yeah, I'm happy to share my PowerPoint file.
Okay,
Absolutely.
good. So you can send it to me later, and I'll add the link in the video description. So it should be there in the coming days. Ahmad and other people interesting. Yeah. Okay. What's up beside that? Interesting comments. From Yaneg asking, how big is the BIM support team at Jasmax?
So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 at the moment. Yeah. Just to support, we got like the BIM support team is a bit a general term, but just for Revit support, there's one person at the moment that's dedicated for Revit support, and then the other ones can jump in if needed. And then we got one person who's more dedicated to our content library.
Okay, so what's the ratio? I've heard like other people talk. What's the ratio of like BIM support person for the amount of Revit user, generally speaking? So what would that look like for you? And do you think it's enough? Do you have enough?
Yeah, I think it's enough, to be honest.
Okay.
We got just over 150 Revit users, and to be honest, I think one person. Well, we got two. Like one is looking after the content, and the other one's just doing Revit support. It doesn't just do Revit support. He also looks after new format and looks at new workflows and processes. I personally think that's enough. We could probably do with one person just dedicated to the content, because we don't. Like I say, we got one person that does the content, but it's not like she's constantly creating content. It would be good if we had one person that could just go through our library, fix all of the content, and create new content when requested. We don't really have that.
All right, thanks. I think we went through most of the questions. There's interesting discussions about note taking. I just mentioned Notions with Jordan saying he's using Notion to take notes. He mentioned ClickUp for task management. And somebody else mentioning capacities. I think it's another note-taking system. I just finished reading or listening an audiobook to a book called Building a Second Brain. It's all about note-taking. Pretty interesting. And I'll admit that my note-taking could be more organized. So something to look forward to.
Somebody is asking if BIMBeats causes any performance degradation. Yeah, no, we've had no issues with BIMBeats. I think because the IDN doesn't do much of recording what people are using in Revit. It's not like a plugin that really interacts with the software. I think that's where we start having the issues.
Okay, Good. And another question: during lockdown, was there an uptake in training for Revit users?
It's so hard to say because like
Yeah.
you get lots of people that join online, but then you don't know if the person on the other side of the screen is actually, proactively listening or
Hmm.
it's just tuned in and then he's having a coffee or lunch. Uh, so hard to say. I can say though that I've been at Jasmax for 6 years. I used to do training, but I've seen. I think it is sinking in people in Revit user. Like I think they're getting better at using the software. I think the biggest issue we have is for the new starters every time when they join, because lots of them have got very little knowledge on how to use the software, and obviously they don't know what our best practices are. So the new starters are always a challenge. But in general, like if I had to look at the trend overall, I think people are getting better and better using the software and taking advantage of all of the tools.
All right. So just looking a final glance at the chat, Jordan that says it will be really interesting topic to see some actually practical family schedule from a bigger studio or methodology behind actually teaching people. Sorry if it was covered here. Yeah, Jordan, one of the good episodes you should check out the episode I did with Jens from Big Architects. It's called BIM at Big, and they cover like their whole BIM philosophy, generally speaking. It was a pretty good episode, I think. Okay. Notion is great, but it's not how we think. The brain is more like Obsidian or Rome. Okay, still a few discussion on note taking. But anyway, if I had to recap what you've just said, Revit plugins it really loads up boosts the opening time for Revit. It slows down, and it can cause crashes and bugs. So you do test every single, not only the plugins but every tools in the plugin to make sure they don't crash for all version. I really liked your Excel spreadsheet. So you try to get the data to make sure that the plugins are actually used. You're trying to enable and disable them, but the tools are not perfect yet. So yeah, all of that was super interesting. And
thank you.
before closing the session, let me go back once again. Next week, no live show. However, there's a webinar, but you need to register. It will not be on YouTube. It's at revitpure.com/family-webinar. And the link is also in the description of this video. So it's 1 hour and I'll geek out about Revit families, especially about the visibility of component of families to help you control visibility on multiple level of details, controlling visibility for 2D elements, for 3D elements, when cut, when not cut. It can get pretty complicated, and I do cover some funky situation. And the webinar includes this handout that you will receive, a PDF guide that is, if you're familiar with the Revit Pure pamphlet, it's a bit similar, but it's about this topic of visibility for Revit families. So again, next week, 3 p.m., make sure to register for the session. You need to register. It's not on YouTube, once again. And next week with Naveen Nabil. And it's funny, like Monica just mentioned that Ideate is her favorite plugin. And we've got someone from Ideate. It's total coincidence, by the way. Naveen is going to come on and talk about Ideate software, but also just the philosophy behind these plugins and these tools. And the episode is called Mastering the Art of Revit Data. Isn't that a beautiful title? She actually came up with it. And back to you, Monica. I just wanted to say thanks for this presentation. I've learned a lot. I think people in the chat did as well. Any final words or something you wanted to mention?
No, but thank you so much for having me. I think it's been great. I mean, I've been watching this webinar, these sessions for a long time, and to actually be in it, that's almost an honor. So thank you for having me.
All right, I appreciate it. It was super interesting, great presentation. So thanks, Monica. Thanks to everybody in the chat. Thanks to everybody watching the replay. And see you next week for the webinar in 2 weeks with Naveen. So bye.